Hi guys, and welcome to the Cambridge Creatives Q&A with Roger and James Ellis Deakins. I'm Hannah, the president of Cambridge Creatives.
And I'm Harriet, Executive Officer of Cambridge Creatives. Thank you so much for supporting Cambridge Creatives. We are a student-run creative collective. We're curating a series of talks with world-renowned professionals in film, TV, and theatre. So please follow our Facebook page to find out more about future events and opportunities. So just before we begin, we have a couple of housekeeping rules. If you have any questions for our guest speakers, please type them into the Q&A function, not the chat. So the Q&A function should be about here, and we'll read them out for you. And then also bear with us if there are any technical difficulties. We're dealing with university Wi-Fi, so it's very unpredictable. And then let us know in the chat if there are any problems hearing or seeing us. And most importantly, enjoy the Q&A.
So just a little introduction for our guests today. So Roger Deakins and James Ellis Deakins are the masters behind some of cinema's greatest and most beloved films, The Shawshank Redemption, 1917, The Big Lebowski, Skyfall and Blade Runner 2049, to name but a few. The pair are best known for their collaborations with renowned directors such as the Coen Brothers, Mendes and Denis Villeneuve. The BFI has called Roger Deakins one of the greatest artists of light and shade in movie history for his cinematography. And his remarkable 15 Academy Award nominations and 2 wins are testament to this. Over the last year, Roger and James have created and hosted the podcast Team Deakins, in which they interview previous collaborators and colleagues in the industry and discuss their extensive filmography. We're really honoured to have these phenomenal filmmakers speak, so thank you very, very much. My first question for the both of you is, when did you know that you wanted to work in film?
This is turned to us.
Yeah, go on then.
No, you go. You go first.
I realized, no, I was going to be flippant. I didn't really realize it was a slow transition. I mean, I went to art college because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I liked painting. And then I discovered photography. And then I started thinking about, well, what about documentaries? And the National Film School opened up in the UK. And a friend of mine was applying and told me about it. And I thought, well, wow, could I really have a career in film? And so I applied to the film school and didn't get in. And but then I went for an interview and asked why I didn't get in. And it was intimated I would get in at the second attempt the next year. So I eventually went to the National Film School. So it was a slow process, and it wasn't till I was on a set of a feature film that I suddenly realized, my God, yes, this is now my life,
And I think for me, it was not on my sphere at all. But when I was in college, one of the things I did on the side is I did these multimedia shows with a friend of mine who talked me into it. So it was basically slides put together with a soundtrack and telling a story. But one of the ones that we did, we called Lady Beware. And they wanted us to do something about rape on campus, but they didn't want us to say that rape could happen by someone that you know. So we had that challenge, and I realized how visually you could tell something without telling something. So we shot it in campus landmarks and things like that to say, it happens here, it happens here. So I enjoyed doing that so much. I thought, oh, well, I love to tell stories. I should do that. But then when I started working, I actually started in a film lab. So I ended on the technical side, which was fun, but it's more fun now dealing with
but
creating
that's
stories.
your way in, that was the thing, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think when you're young, especially when you were young at our age, if you know what I mean.
Forever ago.
The world wasn't as open as it is now. I don't think you could see the opportunities. My dad was a builder, so I worked on the building sites in the summers, school summers and stuff. And the avenues open to you, the career, advisor at school said, well, you could probably get a job in a bank. It was that kind of perspective on your life. And that was just anathema to me. I just couldn't think about that. And that's why I went to art college and gradually discovered what I really enjoyed doing,
And it's a real gift to do something that you love to do, because you run across people that are doing great jobs, but they don't really love it. And you realize how lucky you are to be able to do something you love.
Just finding it too.
Yeah, right. Yeah, true.
Well, we're very glad that you both found it, needless to say.
We are too.
Yeah.
So there's lots of students watching who want to go into film and would like to follow in your footsteps. What would be your like number one piece of advice to give them?
Find yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, find what things mean to you. You know, don't try to copy somebody else. I couldn't give advice. You know, I went to the film school. I can't imagine how else I could have got into the film industry if it had not been for the film school opening up. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, no, I agree with you. Find your own eye, find your reason that you want to do it. And there are so many ways to be able to do that now, because you have your phone. So create a small movie on your phone and learn from your mistakes. People are afraid to make mistakes, but boy, if you make a mistake, you really learn. So
there's no one way of doing it. That's the thing. You can't learn by copying somebody else. You can be inspired by somebody else, like we have, but it's no point trying to copy. You must find your own voice, if you like. It's a bit of a pretentious term, but I mean, I think it sums it up. You know, you must.
Definitely. And speaking of this kind of distinct voice of your work, when did the two of you kind of realize that your partnership could both be professional and personal? And James, could you sort of describe for the viewers what your role entails and how unique and sort of integral it is to the process of the production?
Well, we met on a film set, and I was a script supervisor, and then we got married rather quickly. I said that.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
But we, for a number of years, I tried to continue scripting, but the script isn't chosen by the DP. The script is chosen by the director. So sometimes we would work together, sometimes we wouldn't. And we realized that we kind of wanted to be together and not spend those long times apart. So I stopped scripting and I started doing what I do behind the scenes, which was a lot harder. But I basically, because I know a lot technically anyway, and because I know Roger so well and I know what he's going for on a normal job, yes, I do the digital workflow, which means setting up how we're going to process, how we're going to see it, what we have to deliver, and also looking at it every day to make sure we've got what we wanted. But I also work with him and we go through the lighting diagrams. If there's some piece of equipment that we need, I just make sure that everybody knows that, and I deal with his guys. And when we're shooting, if there's a camera problem, I determine when we let Roger know, or if we have to, because
better not to.
Yeah, really, as long as we can, and then solve the problem, because a lot of times we have a technical problem, and I'm the one that will just sit there with the tech guys and go through it and through it and through it. So
it's also communicating with the crew
and the producers,
figuring out all the things that we need for the production, you know, whether it's certain pieces of equipment or, you know, access to certain things, when I want to see dailies, and how we liaise with the effects process. I mean, it's strangely that filmmaking has got ever more complicated as it's become digitized, and it's become a much quicker turnover on a lot of occasions. And it's become more complicated actually than when it was just a camera and nobody knew what was happening inside the camera. You shot a bit of film and they leave you alone. But now it's like, you know.
Well, and I also think that visual effects is more and more involved in productions, and it's really important for me to keep in touch with them, because a lot of times they want to do something a certain way, but it's not the way that Roger wants to shoot it necessarily. So I can sit down with them and say, why is that? What is it you're trying to achieve? And then work that problem out with them and find a compromise that works for both sides. So you don't have a situation where the DP snippy with the visual effects and visual effects snippy with it. Oh yeah.
You know, I mean, we're really very much in sync, you know, like when we cook, you know. I mean, it is, you know, I mean, it's a lifestyle choice as well.
Yeah.
We, you know, we like being together, you know. I mean, we're kind of, maybe we're old fashioned.
No, it works. I mean, I understand why it doesn't work for some people. They like to go on to their own things and then come back and talk about it. I get that. Some days I really get that. But
yeah, really. You deal with this one. No, it's just nice to experience life together, I think.
Especially since filmmaking is such a life experience. You're so isolated with the same group of people. So it's really good when both of you know those people as well.
The crews we work with, I mean, they're kind of like
so
family for us, you know. We don't have kids, we have crews.
Wow, you've never said that before.
No, I just thought of that. It's kind of funny, isn't it?
Yeah, that is funny.
They're a bit old.
I'm not sure the crew's going to think that.
Oh, really? You know what I mean? Working on a film is rather like being part of a family. It really is, when it works well.
Yeah. Well, even when it doesn't work well, then it's like my family.
Hey,
right?
We should move on.
Right. Sorry. Okay, moving on.
So in your podcast, Team Deakins, which if you haven't listened to already, audience, you should definitely listen to. James, you mentioned that you, at the beginning of your collaboration with Roger, like were ignored in board meetings. So how do you think like the industry has changed in like both its appreciation like of your really important role, and then also like in the like treatment of women in positions of authority as well?
Yeah, I think the individual also has to learn how to handle it, and so I've learned over the years. One of my methods is just to learn everything technically, because then I know more than they do, and to be able to be right about that, but also knowing when to stand up for yourself and when to let it go. That's a big thing, and it's really hard. But yes, there are more women, because in the beginning, the script supervisor oftentimes was the only woman on set, and it was strange. Now there's a lot more women, and so I think it's easier. I do still think you have to prove yourself more, and like throughout the time with women who wanted to get into the camera department, for instance, they were always showing that they could lug those batteries up the hill and things like that, because they had to, because that was, you know, the excuse. Well, they can't carry heavy stuff, so they proved it to themselves. But I think learning that fine line between being strong and not being bitchy, because that allows them to go, oh, you know, it's just a woman, is tough. And so sometimes turning to other women that you're working with is really helpful.
We've never been in a meeting where James hasn't had a chair to sit in.
Yes.
If you get the allusion to the Turkish meeting between the EU and the Turkish president. The lady didn't have a chair.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things you have to sort of set up right in the beginning. And when I wasn't taking a credit, it was harder. But now, and also now they know how we work together. And so we don't have to explain it every time.
It's like, it's you know, I mean, I suppose it's not the same, but it is a little bit similar when I first started, you know, because I left the film school and started shooting quite quickly, in fact, quite quickly on some drama. And there was a lot of resentment from people that had been in the industry a long time, you know, the old timers, and to somebody new coming in. And, you know, I would often be tested if I could do something, you know. So it happens, true. But it's obviously it's more, the male-female thing has been there for a lot longer, and it's a lot more, you know, systematic, or whatever the word is.
Kind of moving from those sort of early beginnings in the industry to your frequent collaborations, you've worked with the Coen Brothers on 12 different films. Why do you think this collaboration has worked so well? And how has your relationship developed over the years in this kind of sort of shared visual language?
You know, I don't know. You just hit it off with people, don't you, really? I mean, I know that they approached me for Barton Fink, which is the first film I did with him, because I was actually from the UK and not America. And they wanted somebody non-union. I mean, you know, so you start with somebody for rather tenuous reasons. But we just got on, actually, from our first meeting. We just got on. We kind of similar sense of humor, and
they're so non-fussy. You know, they're
very matter of fact.
They care very much about what they're doing, so they do the prep and all of that. But they also the trappings of Hollywood is just not for them.
Yeah. So, you know, and they wanted somebody that would light and operate, because they like working with a small, intimate crew.
Yeah.
So, you know, things just, it was funny, a funny story. They did, when they were asking other directors about me, they called up one director who said, he likes to operate himself. He doesn't like shooting with multiple cameras. He doesn't like zoom lenses, and a whole list of things that I don't like. And Joel was saying, he said to me years later, he told me this.
Which said, the guy was saying in a negative.
He said everything the director was saying as a negative towards me was actually in Joel's eyes a positive. So he said, oh yeah, well, that's great.
So thank you very much.
Yeah. So, you know, each to his own, that's the thing, isn't it? You know.
You were saying before about like the production process, and like you said before that there's an extensive pre-production process when working with the Coen Brothers, and that is quite a formal way of making film. Is this a part of another part of the attraction of working with them? Is it especially useful to you in your position to have such extensive preparation?
No, and that's always been true, actually. We came back from working on, I think it was Kundun, and then only a few weeks later we went straight on to shoot Big Lebowski. I think it was one of those. So sometimes you don't get a lot of prep, but I mean, they are very prepared, and they shoot in a very, I was going to say a very simple way. It's simple because they know what they want.
That's
they don't shoot a lot of coverage, you know, and they like shooting single camera, and you know, so it's not necessarily the prep. It's as James says, it's the passion for doing it, and it's that very direct approach that we like, you know. Simple.
Simple, yet very effective. Out of the dozens of films that you've made with the Coen Brothers, is there any particular film or kind of sequence that you're most proud of, or either proud of making or enjoy the most watching?
I think, I don't know, it depends on you know, you like a film, you wake up in the morning, you think, oh, I'll watch a film today, and it's funny, it depends on your mood, doesn't it? I mean, I love a lot of the films that we worked on together, but I guess The Man Who Wasn't There and No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
I remember, I forget what, we were working on something else, and Joel was saying, well, I think we're going to be writing this script for this book, No Country for Old Men. And I knew the book, and it was kind of wonderful. And I said, you've got to direct it. And at the time, Joel and Ethan, I think, were a bit on the fence whether they would direct this themselves. You know, they were writing it, which they often do. They often write scripts for other people. And I was just so keen for them to direct that film. I just love the project. And so that's one of the ones I think, I've got most connection with, I suppose. Yeah.
So we're now going on to another frequent collaborator, Sam Mendes. So Jarhead was your first collaboration with Sam Mendes, and the cinematography of that film is so striking because like the camera is handheld for nearly the majority of the film. What motivated this decision?
Yeah, it was funny that, because I read the script and I knew Conrad Hall really well, and Conrad Hall is a cinematographer that I worked with Sam previously, and Conrad had said how Sam usually very prepared in storyboards and all the rest. And so I went into a meeting with Sam, and he said, we'd like to do this film and everything. Yeah, great. So we started talking about it. He said, Well, I don't want to rehearse. I don't want to do storyboards. I want to shoot it. I think we'll shoot it handheld. And I went, oh my God, you know, it's like, not only am I following the footsteps of Conrad Hall, who's, I think, one of the greatest cinematographers ever lived, but I'm going to do it with no rehearsals and shooting handheld. So, yeah, well, I like a challenge.
And yet again, it's an iconic scenes.
It was lovely doing it because, I mean, I came originally from documentaries, and I love shooting handheld. And to get that chance to do a film like that handheld. And again, I love handheld, but I don't like sloppy handheld. I don't like deliberately wobbly handheld. I like handheld as if I was there shooting a documentary. I'd try and do it as steady and as you know, everything else. And so it was really nice to have that chance to do it. Yeah.
I was going to say, do you think your background in documentary filmmaking really sort of enhanced this very realist and authentic narrative of being like reenacting the Gulf War almost?
Yeah, it's very much that. And we did do quite a lot of research. You know, we looked at a lot of footage and images to make sure everything that we were doing was, in terms of its look, was authentic. And it was also very much the relationship between the camera and the actors. You know, when you're shooting handheld like that and you're not doing rehearsals, but you're shooting more than one take, obviously. We would shoot a lot of takes and we would build it up. And sometimes I would be shooting and talking to Jake, you know, Gyllenhaal, as we were actually working, as we were actually shooting. I said, well, Jake, can you slow down a bit? I'm going to come in front of you. And, you know, so it was all that going on, which was really, you don't often get to do that, but it's all about that trust between, you know, Sam, the director, the actors, and myself walking around. It was really fun, you know, it's great.
Amazing. Now, moving on to quite a different film with Skyfall. Your approach on how to shoot a Bond film was distinctly different to other movies, using like a single camera setup wherever possible. Did the studio try and push you in a different direction with this? And like, did you find any difficulty shooting with this method?
Well, I think the Bond people are always very supportive of the creatives. So they didn't understand it. Right. By the way, that's not our second film with Sam. Revolutionary Road is the second. But yeah, they were surprised, but they said, okay, we'll go with it. And
yeah, it's actually often not the studio, but maybe a line producer or somebody who thinks, well, you know, which we've had in a few occasions, actually, not just Skyfall. But they said, well, surely you want more than one camera on the set. And you go, well, yeah, on 1 or 2 days, we will. Yeah. One day we had 11 cameras. But for the most part, it was single camera. And I remember when Sam rang up, we were in Australia, weren't we, doing on Unbroken? When was it? Skyfall?
No, Skyfall, we were in Santa Fe.
Oh, we were in Santa Fe, right, True Grit.
Yeah.
And Sam rang it up and he said, I'm going to do a Bond movie. Please don't put the phone down. and he said, can we talk about it when in LA, you know? And so we went for a walk on the beach talking about it. Because I'm not a big Bond fan, you know. They're not my kind of movie, frankly. And he said, no, I want to make this because it's going to be a story to itself. And I said, well, how are we going to approach it? You know, it's big action and all that. He said, yeah, we'll do it like we've done the other 2 previous films. As much as we can, we'll do single camera, except for obviously there'll be big scenes and there'll be some second unit. There's no way you can do it without. So that's basically what we did, you know. I mean, quite a bit we had 2 cameras. And so I say sometimes we had 11. We had a second unit that worked for a long period, but
I think too, a lot of times it's the line producer because one, they're looking at the budget and those cameras were budgeted and they go, well, wait, you've got the money, why aren't you doing this? And also because they oftentimes bring in line producers who are used to doing big movies. Mm-hmm. So they're saying, but you can't do it this way because they've worked on other big movies.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic really because it's, you know, it was the most successful Bond movie, And you know, we had the same sort of conversations doing Blade Runner.
Yeah.
You know, why isn't it multiple camera?
But it's great because then every time you go to them and say, listen, we need this piece of equipment, and they go, oh, I don't know, that's a little expensive. You just go, well, yeah, but we're only using one camera. There's a whole lot in your budget.
Amazing. It's almost like an indie approach to big budget films. It's like very focused on the narrative, and I love it.
It's just focused on what you need. You know, you're not just shooting off huge amounts of footage to make a film in the cutting room. You're just making those decisions either in prep or on the day on the set.
With the directors that we're working with, yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You know, and even when you're not storyboarding, you know, Sam's very precise about the coverage he wants on the day. You know, there was very few occasions where we were just, there were no occasions where we were just shooting for the sake of it. Even the second unit work, which was basically the opening of Skyfall in mainly in Turkey, we had done a previs, we had an animatic of it. I mean, we'd done it for every cut, every timing, had all the lenses marked out. And in fact, at the end of the whole schedule, we stayed in Turkey to shoot a lot of that ourselves. The A unit stayed to do it with Daniel because we wanted to integrate, you know, Daniel into the what was the second unit stuff, you know.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly precise. I was wondering how that sort of translates into what is one of my favorite scenes, the sort of Shanghai sequence with the almost like screensaver behind. It is so visually stunning. I was wondering what the idea was behind it and how you were able to execute it, and also have basically like a fight scene going on in the foreground.
I wish Sam was here because we could have a laugh about that. because that they had scouted Singapore. They had scouted a number of cities to do locations, and they scouted Shanghai for this. And they said they had a few options of how to shoot it in Shanghai on location. And so I went by myself, and I remember standing in one of these buildings where they thought maybe they could strip out this office and shoot this scene. And I'm just like agog. So when I got back to Pinewood, I started talking to Dennis Gassner, the designer, and to the line producer as well, and said, I'm not sure about this. I said, what about doing it on stage? And they went, what, really? And what happened was interesting because in a way, as luck would have it, we never went to Shanghai because a storm came in and blew away a standing set in a studio there that we were going to use for the casino. So when that went, they said, well, there's not much point going to Shanghai if we don't have that standing set. So I said, yes, great, then let's do this one big scene in the tower block. Let's do it on the 007 stage. And so we mocked it up. Dennis Gassner did a little model on a tabletop, like 8 by 8 square feet. And they put in little computer screens to mimic where we would have these big, you know, LED advertising hoardings outside the windows. And it was all scaled. And then we started working with the actual office space. And we said, well, what if it's all glass? Then all that's going to reflect here, and it'll be completely chaos. It won't matter, you can see us, the camera, because it'd be so chaotic, you won't see us. And so we worked like that. And as a screensaver, somebody, and I don't know who, had put these jellyfish on this screen, and they were going like that. So after working this out and designing this whole thing in perfection, laying it out on the 007 stage, somebody said, one of the art directors said, yeah, but what are we going to put on the screens? And Sam and I looked at each other and said, jellyfish. And it was just perfect. How can you better that, this sort of strain? And I think it was Dennis Gassner's designer said, yeah, but what's it advertising? And we looked and said, who the hell cares what it's
really.
advertised? It's just a grey image. So that's somehow some things happened by chance. That was really funny.
Incredible. Never anticipated a story like that behind it. So, moving from Sam Mendes to another phenomenal director, and I will apologize if I pronounce the name badly. So Denis Villeneuve. No? Okay, I'm very proud of that. I read recently that for your first film with Villeneuve, Prisoners, you shot 2 different endings. Did you have a preference for which one went into the final cut?
Oh yeah, we did. I mean, very much. We'd done that was the first time we worked with Denis, and we had a lot of prep, and we talked through the script and in terms of visualizing and all the rest, and we talked through that end, and we very much wanted to end on Jake just listening and hearing this sound. And
we don't know what he does.
Yeah, and the studio was saying, well, yeah, but will the audience know that you know, that he's going to save
or do we want them to think that he did save?
Right.
This way left it open.
Right, but it was like, so we shot this other scene.
And the studio was great because the studio said, okay, shoot it 2 ways, the original way and the way that you want to do it. And what we'll do is we'll cut it in both of those. And when we do the previews, whoever previews more, we'll use that ending. And sure enough, our ending ended up previewing a little bit better, but they stood by their word, and they put it in.
Yeah, it's more, the ending as it is more enigmatic, and I think better for it.
Yeah. Moving swiftly on to another project, because we've just got so many to cover. Moving on to Sicario, the extended tunnel sequence is a brilliant use of mixture of night vision and thermal vision. How did you kind of utilize this? Was it kind of part of the camera or part of sort of visual effects? And whose idea was it to sort of be there in the moment with it?
It's funny because when they come down to the tunnel, they all had prop night effect goggles on, which of course they couldn't see anything, but we couldn't have a lot of light because we were shooting with a camera that didn't need a lot of light. So those actors were basically acting in the dark.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
They did well.
Yeah, but the idea, the whole idea of the scene was about the darkness. So the idea of shooting it like you would normally on a night scene in a film, like, okay, you put up some big fake moonlight. I said to Denis, I'm really struggling over this because it doesn't make sense that the audience can see more than the characters are supposed to see. So he said, well, you know, they're going to be wearing night vision goggles and that. I said, well, yeah, can we play it all through those systems? Why don't we play it all like somebody's POV? And he said, well, that's okay, as long as I can differentiate, you know, one character from another. And he wanted Alejandro to have a very distinct look. So, I mean, the first thing I thought of was infrared, because of, there's a wonderful scene in I Am Cuba that was shot in infrared. And, you know, it started coming in a lot. People use it in their homes now, don't they, to check their, I don't know, the circuits or something. And so James, I think, was researched into infrared cameras. And this wonderful company, FLIR, F-L-I-R, agreed to let us have a camera to test it out. And they make a very high-end camera for highly technical,
for medical reasons,
and also I think natural, whatever.
And there had been one music video that had used that for part of it. So they had done it once, but it was one of those cameras that it's like, well, we can only give it to you for 2 days. Well, we don't really know when we're shooting it. And but they were great.
But they were wonderful. I will give a shout out to FLIR because they provided us the camera for a couple of weeks to test with, and then on the days we needed it for the night shoots.
Well, when we tested it, they had to send a technician too, because this was a completely different camera, so our guys had to learn it too.
It's my one regret on that is that, well, there's two things. There's one shot of Alejandro entering the tunnel that is not through a POV. It's a shot against a very dark blue background, and which I feel is a little unreal, but it kind of works. But the thing I really regret is we shot this test shot, and there's a shot in the scene now where you follow him down the tunnel. You see it in infrared, and the camera hangs on his footprints that have left, you know, heat marks on the steps as he's
all
gone
about
forward.
heat, yeah.
And when we did a test, it was great because those footsteps would disappear because as the heat dissipated, so did the image of the footprint. But obviously the shot doesn't hold long enough to see it's just a little thing, but I kind of love this really strange, ghostly thing. This guy's presence disappeared as the footprints just dissolved as they cooled off. It was really great, But it was so fun to do. And then you cut into the tunnel and all these lights go on. And, you know, again, we were thinking, well, how the hell are we going to light the tunnel, you know, when they're not going to be in these systems? And then, of course, you look at the references for all those cartel tunnels coming from Mexico under the border. And they've all got these really high-tech kind of lighting systems in. So, oh, great, we can just have bare bulbs all the way down. That'll look great. So, you know, it's funny, the things that get you out of trouble, really.
And Sicario had another scene in there that we also shot two different ways, which is when Benicio kills the family. Because,
did we shoot it too? I don't think we shoot it.
That's right. No, we had that discussion up to the night we were shooting.
To the night we were shooting,
Yeah.
So, it's interesting.
A lot of playing with different options. You spoke previously about kind of other inspirations from other films. One of the other scenes I love is the dusk raid scene and that beautiful use of silhouettes. Did you have any sort of particular inspirations from other films or like paying homage to other cinematographers, or was it your unique stamp?
I'm not sure which scene you're talking about.
Oh, when they've got the sun setting behind. Have I got the wrong one?
I think it's when the figures are like silhouettes and they slowly fade into the darkness.
Oh, but as they go down the hill,
that's the head of this.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, again, that shot we talked about in an office, you know, before we started shooting, and then we laid it out on the location we'd found, and you know, it was, you know, it's a lot of prep and a lot of just discussing things and coming up with visual ideas. That's the thing. Denis is he's very concise, you know. I mean, you take quite a while. We had a lot of time just sitting in an office kind of mulling over things, but he wants to get to the essence of what the thing is about. And I think Sicario, we watched it again the other day, didn't we? I think it's an amazing film, actually. I really think it's a great blend of a film that kind of grabs you and sort of entertains you, but also kind of, you know, leaves you with questions and challenges you, you know. I really think it's a good film.
Going from one amazing film to another, to Blade Runner 2049, did you feel pressure working on a sequel to a classic whose visuals especially were like so groundbreaking? And was there like any expectation for you to try and like have an aesthetic continuity between this sequel and Ridley Scott's original?
It might have been from other people and studio, maybe, I don't know. I didn't really get any pushback. I mean, my only reference was Denis. And it was rather like talking to Sam about doing a Bond movie. Talking to Denis about doing Blade Runner, I'm going, well, what is the first thing? Is this a standalone film? Are we doing an homage? And I said, I don't want to go there if it's anything to do with the original, other than having a story kind of connection. And he said, no, I want to make us, our film. You know, this is a very particular film, and it is. It has you know, obviously has a connection with the Harrison Ford character, but yeah, I didn't feel. I couldn't have lit it like Jordan Cronenworth, for God's sake, anyway. So you can only do it the way you find, you know.
But it was also one of the first things that was absolutely definitive.
Yeah.
This is not a sequel. This is not. This is a standalone film. And throughout the whole shooting, all these people writing articles would ask that question. It was always answered, this is not a sequel.
And it always go, well, sorry, no, this one looks kind of really flat and grey and ugly. Sorry about that.
I remember seeing it in the cinema. It was the first film I ever saw in my local cinema, and I just fell in love with it. It was phenomenal. Yeah. Like, speaking of, the visual effects were a really fundamental part of creating this like fantastical world. How did this impact on your work? Like, how did you have to consider it while you were shooting?
Oh, we had a lot of meetings.
Yeah, we had a lot of meetings, but again, you know, Denny, again, he's like Sam Mendes. He's like, you want to do as much in camera as possible. The visual effects there are there to support what's being shot. Now, obviously, there are shots in Blade Runner that are completely CG, or they have photographed elements that are put in as a CG environment. But for the most part, there's always a plate. There's always a shot that was made in Iceland or Mexico City or somewhere. You know, all the black landscape was shot in Iceland. All the cityscapes in that gray opening were shot in Mexico City. And Dylan Goss, the helicopter cinematographer, he was doing all the aerials. He would be ringing us up or sending us a kind of little file of an image he got. And there would be a lovely shot of Mexico City, but the sun was out, and Denny and I would go, nope. You got to stay again, try again. And then Dylan would say, I might get a shot in the morning, but it's going to be really cloudy and pouring with rain. It's going to look like shit. And we said, yes, get up there. If you can get up there.
Yeah.
And he would come back saying, I got this shot. It was so dark. And we go, and we looked at what he got, and it was wonderful. So we were very lucky with those. There's the sort of people that really help create and
well, and sometimes
look.
Sometimes visual effects will indicate, oh, well, we can fix the weather afterwards, but that's something that never really works. So that's something we always really push for. Well, 1917, that was all about the weather.
Yeah. A lot of the time on Blade Runner, I remember Denny and I were pushing back effects because we were involved right up to the final timing. You know, we were looking at effect shots and we were seeing them here in LA on a remote system with London. And we were saying, but you've put in, you know, there's this trash mazer sequence. And they said, well, yeah, that shot, you put in a sun and you put in some backlight on a model that we'd shot, and it looks lovely. So it's not usable. It's not right because it looks lovely. You know, it's very hard to push back when somebody's done wonderful work, but it's not what you want, you know. So Denny and I were very, very conscious of not allowing that sort of thing to creep in, so that there remained a sort of singular vision, which a lot of people might not have liked, but it was what Denny wanted, which was this sort of grey, lowering, kind of very claustrophobic world, you know.
And also when you have a lot of visual effects in a film, even if it's just touching up backgrounds and everything, you are passing it through a lot of different people, especially
that was the thing.
Yeah, when you have a deadline. So those people are putting their own opinion sometimes on it because they weren't there on the set. They're doing the best that they can. But that's why you really have to watch it at the end and go, no. This is too sunny. No.
Absolutely.
This is too yellow.
I've got to make a point. I'm not being critical of the people that were doing the work. Not at all.
Yeah, no, they did great work.
As James says, it's like we work on animation sometimes, and you have different people doing different sequences, and the work's wonderful. I'm not criticizing the work, but it's got to fit together.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my job as a cinematographer is to make a film feel, every image in a film to feel in the same world. So you have to carry that philosophy through to working with effects work, you know, that goes on in the background. It can't stand outside the rest of the visual kind of tone of the film, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I heard a story about how you, was it color graded Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And
Probably, yeah.
And changed all of it so it had this like sort of sepia tint.
Yeah, you know, it wasn't really a sepia tint. I mean, the problem with that
was when it was done.
When it was shot.
Yeah.
When the guys were when we were talking about the film, it didn't have a schedule. It was like, oh, well, maybe we'll shoot it in, I don't know, Arizona or somewhere. We'll shoot it somewhere dry and dusty, and you know, they wanted this kind of like old-fashioned faded postcard look, you know. They didn't want sepia, they wanted something faded and dusty. But then then it comes, okay, there's a tax break in Mississippi and the actors are available in July, August, so we're in Mississippi in the middle of summer. And I said, well, it's green, Joel, you know,
really
it's green, really green, you know, there's moss hanging from everything, it's green. Oh, what are we going to do? So we did a whole lot of testing, photochemical testing and all the rest, but then realized we couldn't do it that way. Or we could, but it was like so complicated. And
well, and also when you affect layered. In photochemical, when you affect one color, you're affecting them all. You can't like isolate it.
So, you know, but then the digital technology had moved on. We thought beginning to move on, yeah. We thought, well, let's give it a go that way. I did some tests. I shot some scenes in Griffiths Park and played with them digitally, and yeah, they look really promising. So Joe and Ethan said, I remember them saying, well, yeah, that is promising. We're not going to be doing our post, you know, we have a year in the contract to cut the film and finish it, so it'll be a year away before the technology will have moved on by then, won't it? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Talk about a gamble.
So that's the way we went. I mean, I'm glad we did, but it was a struggle. I mean, the technology was only just there, really.
Yeah, some days it wasn't there.
Some days it wasn't there, and some days it was there. Some weeks it was there, and then it wasn't. So it'd crash, and you'd
lose everything you did.
Lose a whole week's work.
Yeah, it was very frustrating. And at the end of that, Roger said, I am never doing another DI in my life.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't with that system.
I know that you say that now, but you did make it a blanket statement.
I did, yeah, I do that sort of thing. But we had to select colors. You know, we had to pick out the greens, and I had to alter the greens and make them kind of yellow or brown. And you know, one green there's not just green, there's different greens. So you had a number of selects going on the same piece of negative, and it was like complicated.
I guess moving on to Shawshank, so we can sort of get more in depth. It's so strange to think now that it has the top score on IMDb and is so well beloved, but it apparently was a risk to take at the time, and didn't do as well on the opening weekend as you thought. What was it?
Which opening weekend? Because they re-released it only a few months after the first time, and it didn't do any better. I was really shocked with the way it was released. Actually, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to mention names, but somebody didn't do the publicity any favors on that film.
I think it was a movie that back then got discovered in VHS.
Yeah.
And, you know, when people were renting movies and they started to discover it, and then it went.
I think it was the top VHS for nearly a year. That was like incredible. But nobody went to the cinema, which is a shame. We did
just recently.
We recently did a remastering of it, which was fantastic. Warner's went back to the camera negative. They did all the opticals digitally, so now there's none of those, you know, intermediary opticals and all that grainy. It looks really quite good, I think. You know, so I'm pleased about that, because it's I mean, it's a good film. Yeah.
Well, I really want to see that in the cinema at some point. I'll put that on my to-watch list.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
So what would you say was the biggest challenge that you guys faced when you were working on Shawshank?
The schedule.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same on any film. I mean, the kind of ambition is usually more than the schedule and the budget will, you know, and that's not, I'm not just saying that's the ambition of the director or the producer, it's my ambition and everybody else's ambition. And yeah, so we were kind of quite up against it on the schedule. For me, the biggest challenge was lighting some of those interiors, because we had a real prison where the mess hall and a lot of the governor's offices and a lot of the other interior spaces were, the mailroom and stuff. And that was a lot of lighting. I mean, those prison rooms, there wasn't any light in it. I couldn't have shot anything in there. So, and to be able to light it so you can shoot a 10 or 11 hour day, you know, it's a lot of light. And yeah, that was a struggle. And then we built the main like bullpen of all the cell block with the interior space and all the
atrium,
whatever you call it. Atrium, yeah, that's good. Like 4 blocks. That was all built as a set in an old warehouse. And the warehouse was basically glass walled, so we had to blacken all the glass to make it into a space, and then light it as though it was open to the daylight, and light it to night with all the practicals. So that was technically that was the hardest thing, lighting that film. And I always remember when it came out, and I went to a meeting of other cinematographers once, and I heard some cinematographers saying, well, yeah, Shawshank looked pretty good, but there was no lighting in it. You know, he just shot it with natural light. And I go, well, that's a kind of very strange compliment, really. You know, for another cameraman to say there was no lighting when I'd never used so many lights. You know, it was like huge amount of lighting. But there you go.
That sounds like a very fulfilling challenge that you definitely...
Yeah, I mean, I love that about the job, really. It's such a mix of sort of I like to think a creative kind of spark and a very technical challenge, isn't it? You know, that's what's...
And some of the best things come out of restrictions. Yeah. And we found that a lot when talking to people on the podcast. Everyone seems to agree that limitations bring some real inspiration.
Yeah.
If we all could have all the equipment that we wanted,
it
would be rather dull.
It would be scary. Yeah. I once worked with Bob Rafelson, who I consider one of the really great directors. And 5 Easy Pieces alone is a masterpiece he did. But I worked with him on a film called Mountains of the Moon. And he said, Roger, if the studio ever gave me everything I wanted, I'd be completely lost. He said, you beware of that.
Wow. Speaking of limitations, sort of directing the creative vision, moving on to 1917 and having these kind of trenches built to fit the length of a scene and having it being so almost like clockwork and brilliantly timed. Yeah, can you sort of explain your thinking behind it, how you sort of figured out the process that it could be one shot and not have to sort of cut and just move so that you could have this one continuous scene?
Well, I mean, that was really Sam's idea in the script. It was right on the head title page of the script, and we questioned it, didn't we?
Yeah, well, we didn't believe it in the beginning. Oh, it's just...
We thought that maybe that's just sort of like gas for the studio or something. And then, you know, reading it, you realize, well, it is real time. And it's basically about 2 characters, you know, will become 1 character. So it's very focused point of view, real time. And then you think, well, that kind of makes sense, but then you think, well, how the hell can you do that?
But I think the most important thing is that you and Sam sat down together first and talked about what you needed in each scene. Yeah. Forget about the one shot. Oh, we should be on him at this point, on him on that point. We need a 2 shot here, just to get an idea of what we were looking for. And then we figured out how to do it.
Yeah, and then it was almost like going back to Jarhead in a way. Okay, how does the camera dance with the characters? You know, obviously you don't want to. I mean, that wonderful film, Son of Saul, either stays behind somebody or in front of them, and it really works for that. But it wouldn't have worked for us. So we thought, well, we have to sometimes come out and see figures in a landscape. You know, we have to have some breadth. We have to have some claustrophobia, and we go through all these different kind of feelings, like the tunnels, the trenches. Then you're out in the open, wide nothing, and a little plane comes across the sky. So you have a lot of different sensations. So yeah, it was quite a long process of just storyboarding, before even doing storyboards, just drawing ideas and then developing them as single shots, and you know, then at the same time trying to overcome the technical challenge and finding locations that not only matched for what Sam wanted in the scene, but that could fit together in a way that made sense. So you know, it was a lot of work and a lot of prep, and then we spent a lot of time with George and Dean rehearsing. Like you were saying, we had to rehearse the scenes in the trench before we dug the trench. So we went into a muddy field in the pouring rain in February, and we rehearsed those scenes. And I shot them with a little point and shoot camera. And we looked at that and thought, does that work? Have we got enough time here? Can the camera come down and around at that point? If we do that, we have to put a setback in the trench. Okay, well, let's have a bit of the trench blown out as though a shell's blown up there. So the camera then can hook around and start following the characters, but it looks an organic part of the set. So all that had to be worked out. And then we had to work out how do we get from one location to another? Yeah. Where does this shot end and the next one begin? And how does that fit, you know, smoothly? And then, as James said, only then had we think, well, how the hell do we get the camera to do that?
Yeah, right. And we tested a lot of rigs, and we ran around a lot with a camera.
Ran around a lot, yeah.
Figured what worked best for what situation.
Two of our great friends and operators ran around as well.
Well, and the grip department.
Yeah. You know, so it was a big challenge. A lot of that went on again at the same time as we were kind of doing the storyboards and working on the locations. At the same time we were testing and practicing. We had a camera car with a jib arm on it, and we had a rig that the grips would handle the camera. Was a little pole, and the camera was hanging from it. They would run with that. The camera car would start moving. They would clip it onto the crane. Then the crane would move out and the camera car would run off, and all the while following the actor and hooking around it. So we tested all those sort of techniques, you know, at the same time.
Yeah. It also was an amazing film in that the collaboration was so amazing, because we shot in the beginning of April, but in October and November, we were having meetings, and the hair department was there, and the costume department, and props. And you normally don't see them until right before. So they had a say, because everything had to work. Yeah. We couldn't like get on the day and go, oh, okay, well, let's just cut to a close-up now. Everything had to work in one. So to have those people there and get their viewpoints in before we committed was great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, also, like James said, also, they couldn't be there when we were shooting. The only people that could be there would be the grips or whoever was carrying the camera at the time. And, you know, we would be in a truck. I'd be operating, you know, maybe half a mile away from the actual set. So none of the backup people could be there. It was only the crew that were actually working with the camera or recording sound, you know.
Wow. So going from like this most amazing project to your future projects, do you have anything in the pipeline that you could possibly tell us about?
We can't really talk about it.
I mean, Sam's going to do a film that hopefully we'll shoot early next year, which for us might be good timing because, you know, we've been a bit cautious. But but it's a very different film again from anyone that we've done together. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Here we are.
Yeah. And it's nice to go back to someone that you know so well.
Yeah.
You don't have to learn that language. You're already there.
It's going to be a challenge, but for
They all are.
other reasons, very different reasons.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good.
There will be cuts.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
That's the scoop there. We've got cuts.
I'm aware that we've kind of got carried away with our questions. Are you happy answering some of the Q&A questions?
Of course.
Oh, amazing. Sorry, I shall just get them up. Whilst I'm reading the Q&A questions, Harriet, do you want to ask our last question?
Yes. So, do you have any TV or film recommendations for us and everybody watching to fill our time while lockdown eases here?
Films to watch?
Yeah.
We've got plenty of films from a long time ago.
Well, we've seen a couple of good ones. We talked to Neil Jordan the other day, so we went through all of his films, which was really wonderful.
It's been really nice just watching, rewatching or watching new films that, or films we hadn't seen of people that we've been talking to on the podcast. That's been a nice excuse to revisit a lot of work like Neil Jordan's and some of Ken's,
and Thomas Vinterberg.
And Thomas Vinterberg.
He was great.
Yeah, Submarino. We'd never seen Thomas Vinterberg's film Submarino, so if you haven't seen that, you should. It's really remarkable film.
And then, of course, Come and See, because we talked to Alexi
Roger
about that.
Deakins. We talked to the cinematographer of Come and See, which is probably one of the greatest war movies ever made, anti-war movies ever made. So if anybody's there not seen Come and See, they should.
Amazing.
But I like to revisit, Andrei Tarkovsky's movies and all sorts of movies, when I kind of feel a bit distanced from filmmaking, and it reinvigorates me, I think.
Amazing. I shall put that on my list. Our first audience question is from Theo Barnett, and he asks, how do you feel about working mostly from storyboards or with more choreographed camera work, thinking of films such as No Country for Old Men in 1917? Is it ever stifling, or does it open up certain creative possibilities for you?
Well, they're very different. You could say that both were storyboarded. 1917 was obviously storyboard. It had to be choreographed. There was a little bit of flexibility in the staging on the day, but not much. If there was flexibility, we would do it in rehearsals, like Blake's death, the scene of Blake's death. The camera movement was worked, some of it was worked, although a lot of it was worked out on paper beforehand. Some of it was worked out, in rehearsals the day before we actually shot the scene. And so you have to have some flexibility. That was an exception. Now, No Country for Old Men, yes, was storyboarded, but you don't stick religiously to those storyboards. I think the storyboarding process is a way of exploring the script visually and discovering what is essential, what the director thinks is essential for the scene, what you need visually. Whose perspective are you going to be in? Do you want to be in somebody's perspective? Do we see this from afar? There's so many ways you can shoot any action, any moment. So you hone in on, you develop that kind of language, if you like. Now, on the day, that you can change, but that's still in your head. You still know, and you still have a fallback for the day. If you can't come up with a better idea, you've always got what you had on paper. So, there's different ways. I don't think it's limiting at all, unless you say, these are the storyboards and we're not doing anything outside of it.
Someone has asked a very interesting question, which I'm quite curious about the answer for. Someone has said, from all like the wonderful like actors and actresses you've worked with, do you have like a favorite face that you've shot that you find like most interesting?
I think any face is interesting, really. No, I have a favorite face. I mean, I think I go back. I mean, I think in a way, I have to say Richard Burton, because I always admired him so much as an actor. And to have got to work with him on his last movie, what was his last movie? And I think one of his greatest movies. I just think what he could do, I'm not saying necessarily in 1984, but what he did as an actor over his career was a kind of extraordinary. And he told so much in his face without doing very much.
It's the same thing with Benicio.
Yeah,
in
Benicio in Sicario, you know. I mean, Benicio would say on set, he said, I don't need to say this. He'd give the dialogue.
I'll say it on my face.
He said, oh, Josh can say this dialogue. It'll be there, don't worry. I just don't need to talk. And he's absolutely right. I mean, there's great actors can do that, can't they? You know, I mean, I just remember watching when I was a kid, Robert Ryan and you know, I just those old actors, what they could do, you know. Mitchum, yeah, Robert Ryan Mitchum and Bogart. I mean, they could do so much with their face, couldn't they? You know, Lino Ventura, some great actors. I wish I'd have shot all of those guys, but I've been lucky. I mean, we've worked with great, wonderful people. Yeah,
definitely. And I love how you described the kind of working with the actors and the directors in tandem as kind of like a dance. Like, I think that makes it all make sense.
I think it is in the end, you know, not every film, but I mean, the culmination of that is 1917, really, you know. It had to be a kind of choreography of everything, you know.
Our next question is from Antoine, and they asked, you were talking about painting earlier. What are your main inspirations for creating images?
I'm just an observer of life, really. I mean, I just love looking, you know. Inspiration from painters, I would have to say Edward Munch or Giorgio de Chirico. I mean, those two are far and away the two painters that have influenced me most all my life, really. I mean, obviously there's many, many more, but I think, you know, I'm just inspired by what I see, really. That's why I was a bit frustrated being stuck at home so long. Really. No, I just love, yeah, being out and seeing things.
Amazing. And then we've talked a lot about your film career, but one thing we haven't really touched on is the fact you've done some incredible music videos. And someone's asked what it was like to do the Sexual Healing video with Marvin Gaye, which is obviously just a piece of history. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I did some wild ones, but they were wild times. They were really great, you know. I remember working on a Genesis video and being on like hour 26 of the shoot. And a producer turned up with a suitcase. He said, we need to work for another 24 hours or something. And he opened the suitcase and paid us cash. So, I mean, they were wild times. They were good. Sexual Healing was funny because, well, it wasn't really funny. I didn't really want to go to America. And I said, there was with a director I worked with a bit, and it was meant to be shot in London. But Marvin Gaye's, one of his family members was ill or something. So he wanted to shoot it in LA. And that was the first time I came to America. Great Satan it was to me in those days. I didn't want to go near America. Now I live here. It was great. We shot in the, where was it? Up on Sunset. And I went out with my camera assistant that night and I lost him. And I spent the night, you know, like late at night, wandering around, retracing the steps of the bars we'd been in as best I could remember. and I found him laid out, but under a table. Who was it? John Entwistle was one of them at the table. There was this whole band of rock stars or something. My assistant had been drinking with them all night. He was under the table. We had to work the next day. Yeah, it was fun. But the video was good, wasn't it? It was fun.
Oh my gosh, what an iconic story.
There's plenty more there, right? Actually, that one, yeah. It was funny. I mean, you know, that was the thing about doing those. It was kind of, they were good experiences.
Definitely. I think we'll probably do 2 more questions. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Amazing. Another anonymous attendee has asked, Mike Figgis once described your work as being like the best drummer in the business, holding the ensemble together but never noticed for itself. Do you like being recognized for individual shots?
No, I don't. Mike's been very nice. Mike's always got a great turn of phrase, isn't he? No, I mean, you know, I'm actually quite a shy person. I don't like being recognized for a shot or for a film. I just kind of love what I do, and I just rather stay in the background. It's fine, you know.
Final question. So Yasmin has asked, with the shift towards online at like home streaming services, with the like smaller screen viewing experience, if you're shooting a film and you're going to be aware that it was going to go on streaming, would that affect the way you approach the cinematography for it?
You're presupposing I would do that.
It's interesting.
I think you would. You have to be aware of the way the viewer's going to see the work, you know. But I hope that's not the case. I mean, I love a cinema. I love the idea of an audience being not alone in a room watching a TV or with a couple of friends. I like the idea of a large audience experiencing something together in the dark. I think there's something about that that's rather mystical.
And it's also a good excuse to get it right, because you say, well, on a big screen you'll see that, and so if you were working with a little screen, they go,
well, there's that. Yeah, there's that. Yeah. I mean, I also love images that are quite simple. You know, I like stripping images down to their real simplest kind of essence, you know. And on a big screen, a simple image has such a power. You know, you think of Lawrence of Arabia, you know, you watch on a big screen, it's really powerful. Or any of the Sergio Leone westerns, or Andrei Tarkovsky's movies. You know, I mean, those images on the screen have such a power. You watch it on a television, even if it's a large television screen. Yeah, okay. But mainly you remember what it was like in the cinema when you first saw it. It's not the same. It doesn't quite have that same. You know, it doesn't draw you in the same way. And I would really miss, you know, shooting for a large screen.
Definitely. I think those are perfect words to end on. Remind us all about the magic of cinema, and hopefully one day we can go back.
It's magic, isn't it? You know, it's magic. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you so much, James and Roger, for your wonderful answers and for giving us time.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone else who joined and asked amazing questions.
Yeah, a big thank you from me as well. This has been incredible. Such an honor. So everyone who's watched, if you've enjoyed, please like our Facebook page for more updates and opportunities. And have a lovely rest of your evening.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Take care, everyone. Bye. Ciao.
Bye.